Life is so much more than a diagnosis. It's about sharing time with those you love, hanging with friends who lift you up, and experiencing all those moments that bring you joy. All hits, no skips. Learn more about Kisqali Ribociclib 200 milligrams at KISQALI.com and talk to your doctor to see if Kisqali is right for you. So long live singing to the oldies, jamming out to something new, and everything in between.
A loving daughter, friend, and musician, 19-year-old college-bound Afrikka Hardy is murdered in a shocking crime that no one could have predicted. Secrets are unraveled. A family and town are left stunned, and detectives are on the hunt for a serial killer. This is the Fatal Attraction Podcast with Last Words, Afrikka Hardy.
She was a stunning and determined teen who had her whole life ahead of her.
She was beautiful. She was a light when she came into a room.
She had an ambitious, really illuminated future for herself.
But just as her life is really beginning, it comes to a sudden and horrific halt.
Camera number one.
It's my friend. I think she's dead.
And they see her in the bathtub, lifeless.
Okay, so is there any marks or anything on her?
There's something wrapped around her neck.
She had to fight for her life.
However, when the case unfolds, will there be more than one victim story to tell?
Missing African American women were going unreported.
Is it possible that you have an active serial killer?
Oh, I have no problem taking you right now to 6 bodies.
October 17th, 2014. It's Friday night in Hammond, Indiana, a suburban town tucked between Gary and the south side of Chicago.
It's about 20 miles south of Chicago, and it's a sleepy suburban town.
You're getting people from the inner city and also people that have lived in the burbs of Chicago as well.
It's around 9 o'clock that evening when Joy Young and her friend Amir Torres pull into the parking lot of a motel on the edge of town.
Joy and Amir had driven down from Chicago looking for a friend of theirs, 19-year-old Afrikka Hardy.
Joy and Amir knew that Afrikka was at the motel to meet someone.
Afrikka was meeting someone new that night, so she told Joy she would check in throughout the evening.
Afrikka had text Joy to let her know, hey, I did arrive, I'm safe, I'm okay.
But after that, nothing.
That wasn't like her to not be in contact with Joy, which definitely made her suspicious and worried.
After a couple of hours, she got worried enough that she decided to bring a friend along to check on Afrikka, to make sure she was okay.
Afrikka, everything okay in there?
You sure this is the right door?
This is the door that she texted me.
After knocking a couple of times with no response, Joy tries the door and discovers it unlocked.
They decided, you know what, let's just walk in.
Afrikka, you here?
They did hear some water running, and that's when they went into the bathroom.
But when they enter the bathroom,
oh my God, Afrikka!
They make a gruesome discovery.
That's when they discovered her body in the bathtub.
Hello?
And they immediately called 911.
Camera number one.
It's my friend. I think she's dead.
What is your friend's name?
Afrikka Hardy.
19-year-old Afrikka Hardy had always been fearless.
She's bold in what she says. She doesn't hesitate.
She was a very outspoken young lady, even when she was little.
Although originally from the Chicago area, Afrikka had spent her teenage years in Colorado.
That's where she spent her formative years. That's where she went to high school.
The upheaval was tough for her because she left everyone she knew back home.
Despite her rough start in Colorado, Afrikka developed a love for harnessing her creative side.
She was really into music. She could sing. That runs in our family.
You would think a typical teenager loved rap music. Not her. She was more like rock star.
She was a go-getter.
And she had big plans for her future.
Once she graduated high school, she became really serious about pursuing her career and also furthering her education and going to college.
She wanted to work, save money, and had an ambitious future for herself.
Not long after graduation, Afrikka moved back home to Chicago in the summer of 2014.
She wanted to start fresh, have a new life.
When she came back to Chicago, she actually moved in with my cousin and my grandmother.
However, once in Chicago, Afrikka's ambitious plans had some trouble gaining traction.
She wanted to go to college, but first she needed to save some money, so she started looking for work.
She struggled to find a job.
Not that Afrikka let that keep her down. Despite her stalled plans for the future, she was also ready to have some fun as a young woman in a big city.
She was a typical teenager, that wanted to do fun things.
Returning to Chicago, she's now being able to experience the city, and she did that. She was going out, hanging out.
She loved to listen to music and dance with her friends and just let loose.
From reconnecting with old friends to making new ones, it wasn't long before Afrikka started turning heads around Chicago.
She was gorgeous. Great body, hair beautiful, flowing. She knew she had it.
She was very outgoing, and people were drawn to her.
It was only a matter of time that she met someone.
And in August 2014, 2 months after her move back to Chicago, she did just that when she locked eyes with 22-year-old Isaiah Norris while at a party with friends.
They started talking and couldn't stop for hours. It was as if they were the only two people in the room.
I'd really love to see you again.
Not only was Isaiah really good looking, he was also smart, funny, and charming.
They were getting to know each other, went on a couple of dates to just see how they meshed together, but he seemed to be enamored with her.
Afrikka wasn't in a huge rush to jump into anything too serious, but she really liked Isaiah too, and so she was excited to see where this might go.
But unfortunately, she would never get the chance. On October 17th, 2014, just 4 months after resettling in Chicago, friends have found Afrikka dead in a motel room 20 minutes south of the city.
Oh my God, Afrikka!
They see her in the bathtub and they immediately call 911.
It's my friend. I think she's dead.
Is there any blood or anything on her?
No.
Okay, so is there any marks or anything on her?
No, but there's something wrapped around her neck.
She had been strangled to death.
They knew right off the bat that this was a homicide.
By the autumn of 2014, 19-year-old Afrikka Hardy had returned to her hometown of Chicago, eager to start the next chapter in her life.
Afrikka was looking for work so she could save for college, but she was also looking forward to having some fun and exploring Chicago as an adult.
She really seemed to have everything going for her, even meeting a new guy, 22-year-old Isaiah Norris.
But now, 2 of Afrikka's friends have found her lifeless body in a motel just 6 miles over the Indiana state line.
Oh my God!
Joy and Amir, when they find Afrika's body, their first reaction is to contact the police.
She doesn't have a pulse?
That's what my friends just said. They said they touched her, don't have a pulse. I didn't touch her.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't try not to touch anything. If possible, if you want to just stand by the door, I've got the police and the ambulance coming.
It's my friend. I think she's
When police arrive on the scene minutes later, they quickly confirm that Afrikka is indeed dead and immediately call for the homicide unit.
Looking at the situation, they knew right off the bat that this was a homicide.
While a patrol officer drives Joy and Amir down to the station for formal statements, homicide detectives arrive at the motel for a detailed examination of the crime scene.
They wanted to document everything. Nothing was too minor, but they obviously wanted to start with the victim.
In the bathroom, detectives find obvious signs that a struggle had taken place.
The shower curtain was partially ripped, and there was a pillow from one of the motel beds stuffed down next to the toilet with blood on it.
They noted that she was missing a fingernail, which indicated that she had fought for her life.
I just know she fought. I just know she fought. When she came across that monster, it was like, oh, I'm gonna fight for my life.
How Afrikka had died is easy to determine.
When they found Afrikka, she had an electrical cord wrapped around her neck.
But exactly where the murder occurred isn't as clear.
With all the signs of a struggle, it wasn't obvious if she was strangled in the tub or if she was placed there after she was dead.
Examining the motel room, however, does offer up some other major clues.
Detectives found a man's button that looked like it had popped off, a shirt.
It seemed likely that it was ripped off during Afrikka's struggle with the killer.
They also found used condom wrappers.
After bagging the evidence to send to the crime lab, detectives also locate Afrikka's purse.
There was cash and credit cards still in her wallet, so robbery didn't appear to be a motive.
However, detectives believe the killer did take one thing.
Afrikka's cell phone is missing from the crime scene.
Detectives make note to subpoena her cell phone records. Then go speak with the motel manager to see if she can shed any light on who had shared the room with Afrikka that evening.
We just have a couple questions for you.
Detectives decided to talk to hotel management and get to the bottom of who was in this room with Afrikka.
Unfortunately, the manager can't give detectives a name.
According to motel records, Afrikka's friend Joy had booked the room online, so there was no record that anyone else had shared the room with her.
Even without a name, though, detectives don't walk away empty-handed.
They did secure from the motel management some surveillance video.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Back at the station, detectives make watching the surveillance video their top priority.
Looking through the surveillance video, a man in a dark SUV pulls up, knocks on the door, and you see Afrikka letting him in willingly.
A little over an hour later, the same man leaves.
The video didn't show anyone else coming in or out of the motel room until Afrikka's friends arrived and found her body.
Detectives believe the man in the video is Afrikka's killer, but they're no closer to learning his identity.
Looking at the video, you don't know who it is. You don't know really what they look like because, of course, this video is not the best quality. It's a little grainy, it's a little distorted.
Detectives weren't able to make out the license plate on the man's SUV either.
Which leaves the two people who discovered Afrikka's body as detectives' best hope for a lead on the killer. 4 hours after discovering her body, an investigator sits down with Amir Torres first, but he claims to have little information to give police.
How long would you say you know Afrikka? I don't know her. I've seen her once or twice, three. I didn't ever even talk to her.
Okay. What else do you know about what's going on here?
I really didn't get involved.
Amir was pretty evasive, so that was definitely going to come across as pretty suspicious.
Amir and Joy just found Afrikka in the most horrible way, so he could have just been in shock.
However, when Amir finally cracks, it's the detective who is shaken.
Amir dropped a bombshell on detectives. He told them that Afrikka did not go to the motel that night to just meet someone new. She was actually there to meet a client.
For money?
Yeah.
More secrets are revealed once we return with more Fatal Attraction.
McDonald's is not new to chicken. So maybe stop questioning their chicken cred and get your hands on the McCrispy. Juicy fried chicken, buttery bun, unmatched pickle to chicken ratio. Yeah, they know what they're doing. In fact, we can honestly say they're not new to chicken, they're true to chicken. The McCrispy. Only at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Life is so much more than a diagnosis. It's about sharing time with those you love, hanging with friends who lift you up, and experiencing all those moments that bring you joy. All hits, no skips. Learn more about Kisqali Ribociclib 200 milligrams at KISQALI.com and talk to your doctor to see if Kisqali is right for you. So long live singing to the oldies, jamming out to something new, and everything in between.
25-year-old Amir Torres has just dropped a major bombshell on the Hammond police, explaining how 19-year-old Afrikka Hardy was earning money.
He was a little hesitant at first, but soon he revealed that he knew that Afrikka was involved in prostitution.
Have you ever helped her find people?
According to Amir, she was advertising her services on a website called Backpage.com.
But that is about as much detail as he can offer.
Amir explained that he only knew this because Joy had told him about it.
With Amir providing little other information, police move on to Joy Young, hoping she can shed more light on the situation. And they cut right to the chase.
So Afrikka's an escort?
Yeah.
According to Joy, Afrikka wasn't planning to make a career of escort work, but she had found it was a way to get enough money to support herself and start saving for college.
This was a way just to make some quick money, or?
Yeah.
That line of business does come with some dangers, but she did the most that she could to protect herself.
Joy and Afrikka had a system where they checked in with each other.
And that was their plan that Friday night.
How did she let you know he was there?
She actually called me and told me.
She did notify Joy that she had a client, as they always do, just keep each other in the loop of what was going on.
She had him exactly at 5:13, and at like 6 o'clock, I started calling him.
Joy says she really started worrying by around 6, since Afrikka was only supposed to be with her client for half an hour.
I was threatening to call the police because she wasn't answering the phone, but she started texting me saying that it's okay. I have a client. It's going to be a long day.
Joy told detectives that Afrikka hadn't mentioned earlier that she had another client coming by, but she also said she wasn't involved with every appointment.
Why'd you take so long to check up on her?
I just was really just trying to wait to see.
But by 8 o'clock, Joy says she had done enough waiting.
Joy decided to call her friend Amir and have him drive her out to Hammond to check on Afrikka and make sure she was safe.
Joy was concerned enough about Afrikka's safety that she wanted to make sure she had backup just in case they ran into anyone threatening at the motel.
And that's when they found Afrikka.
Oh my God, Afrikka!
When asked if Afrika's clients could be traced back through her phone, Joy says that's a little more complicated.
Once they contact, like if they contact your ad, does that come to your
phone? That's what makes it so hard, because the other officer was asking that too, like, is it some type of message in the chat thing, but it ain't nothing like that.
Joy told detectives sometimes they would exchange phone numbers with regulars. But most of the communication was done on the website with usernames to help protect people's identity.
Could she have contacted some guy on here and he killed her during a date or something?
Very possible.
Joy tells detectives she doesn't know the names of any of Afrika's clients, but she does mention that Afrikka has a new man in her life, Isaiah Norris.
I'll just put the name out there. You know what I'm saying?
Afrikka had only been seeing Isaiah casually for a few months since she moved back to Chicago.
Women tend to be murdered by intimates, by boyfriends, husbands, people in the household.
If Isaiah found out Afrikka was working as an escort, it's possible that he lured her to the motel, posing as a client.
Police let Joy go for now and begin digging into the first real lead they have, 22-year-old Isaiah Norris. Their suspicion grows when they run his name through their database.
Isaiah didn't have a criminal record, but according to the DMV files, he did own an SUV, similar to the one that was caught on surveillance video.
That led police to knock on Isaiah's door and get to the bottom of what was going on.
When Isaiah talks to detectives later that afternoon, he tells them that a mutual friend had called him with news of the murder.
I knew something like this was gonna happen.
So, you knew she was an escort?
Yeah, I knew.
According to Isaiah, he wasn't too happy about it and had tried to get her to stop.
She wouldn't listen to me, said I didn't own her.
You argued about it?
Yeah.
Not only does Isaiah admit to being angry about Afrikka's sex work, he also doesn't have a solid alibi.
Where were you last night?
Home.
Was anybody with you?
No.
Could Isaiah be the man in the security video from the motel?
For the moment, detectives didn't have anything to hold Isaiah on, but when they left his house, they immediately put in a call to subpoena his phone records so they could track his movements the night of the murder.
Detectives also subpoena Afrikka's cell phone records and ask her cell provider to ping her phone.
They know that the suspect has Afrikka's cell phone.
If they could track Afrikka's phone, that could give detectives a lead on the killer's location.
But the attempt fails.
Afrikka's phone didn't respond to the ping, which probably meant the killer had either powered it down or possibly destroyed it.
However, examining Afrikka's calls and texts does give detectives their next clue.
Combing through all of the information, there was a number that really stuck out to them because it wasn't a regular number that was in her phone. It was a number that was new.
It seems like maybe Afrikka had contacted her last client via text message and not just through Backpage.
After the last text from this new number, there were no new incoming calls or text messages from any other client that they could tell from the phone record.
Is it possible Afrikka only had one client that night, and the other texts were an effort by the killer to throw detectives off his trail?
It probably wasn't too likely, but it also wasn't totally unheard of for that kind of thing to happen.
The number doesn't match the one they have listed from Afrikka's current beau, Isaiah. But that doesn't necessarily rule him out.
Isaiah's contact was saved under a different number in her phone, and there was no communication between them on this day.
There was always the possibility that this number was linked to a burner phone, so detectives needed to link it to a name to rule him out definitively.
Detectives move quickly to put a name to the number.
Lucky for detectives, it wasn't a burner phone that would be hard to trace back to Isaiah or another suspect. It was just a regular number registered to a man named Darren Van.
43-year-old Darren Van is a resident of Gary, Indiana. But it's not his phone number or his proximity to the crime scene that puts him at the top of detectives' suspect list.
Darren Van, they learned, had served time in prison for sexual assault.
More secrets are revealed once we return with more Fatal Attraction.
McDonald's is not new to chicken. So maybe stop questioning their chicken cred and get your hands on the McCrispy. Juicy fried chicken, buttery bun, unmatched pickle to chicken ratio. Yeah, they know what they're doing. In fact, we can honestly say they're not new to chicken, they're true to chicken. The McCrispy. Only at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Life is so much more than a diagnosis. It's about sharing time with those you love, hanging with friends who lift you up, and experiencing all those moments that bring you joy. All hits, no skips. Learn more about Kisqali Ribociclib 200 milligrams at KISQALI.com and talk to your doctor to see if Kisqali is right for you. So long live singing to the oldies, jamming out to something new, and everything in between.
Detectives investigating the murder of Afrikka Hardy have learned she was texting with a man named Darren Van on the night she was murdered in a Hammond, Indiana motel room.
They were able to identify him using Afrikka's cell phone records.
But it's his rap sheet that really raises suspicion.
Darren Van not only has an extensive criminal record, but he's a registered sex offender.
43-year-old Darren Van was originally from Gary, Indiana, but he had eventually moved to Austin, Texas, where he landed in prison for sexual assault in 2009.
Mr. Van had spent 5 years in prison.
And the details of that case seemed eerily familiar.
Like Afrikka, the victim in the Texas case had been strangled.
Thankfully, she was able to escape and get away. But that was definitely a red flag.
According to his background check, after his release in 2009, Darren decided to return home to Gary, Indiana.
Darren's history and the phone records are more than enough to convince detectives that they have found their killer.
With all these pieces of evidence falling into place, it was sure starting to look like Darren was Afrikka's only client the night that she died.
The timing of the text from Darren's phone to Afrikka's lined up exactly with the timestamp on the surveillance video from the motel. There was no other client, which meant that all those texts to Joy about Afrikka having another client Friday were probably sent by Darren.
Which brings detectives to Darren's home, less than 24 hours after friends had found 19-year-old Afrikka Hardy dead in her motel room.
The Hammond Police Department very quickly made an arrest of Mr. Darren Dion Van.
And of course, they made sure all their I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, got a search warrant.
After an officer puts Darren in a patrol car, detectives head back to his house to execute the search warrant.
Detectives decided this is a good time for us to go in there and see what they can find.
It doesn't take long for detectives to find more evidence to support their theory that Darren is in fact Afrikka's killer.
They noticed some condoms there, the same brand that was in the motel room with Afrikka.
Of course, it's possible that condoms were a complete coincidence.
But the next thing detectives find will be far harder for Darren to explain away.
While they searched the house, detectives found multiple cell phones, and they immediately started to try to figure out if any of them belonged to Afrikka.
Sure enough, when they turned on one of the phones that was powered off, it was clearly their victim's phone.
With more than enough evidence to charge Darren Van with murder, detectives head back to the station to question him. Right away, they notice another compelling piece of evidence.
The shirt that Darren was wearing at the time of his arrest was missing a button, which seemed to match the one they bagged at the motel. So detectives asked him to change.
Then they lead him into an interrogation room.
The detectives decided not to beat around the bush with Darren.
What all did you take from her?
They go and essentially confront him about possessing Afrikka's cell phone and the records that indicate that he had been in a hotel room with her that night.
His response catches detectives completely by surprise.
Her phone.
He didn't even try to deny being there, and he quickly confessed to killing Afrikka.
He talked about how he decided to meet Afrikka there for a sexual liaison.
But the way Darren describes it, things didn't go as planned.
This wasn't supposed to happen. I was just supposed to have sex. What happened from there? I was a little too rough for her. And then we got in fighting.
Oh, you shouldn't have done that.
Darren's story doesn't end there.
Darren claimed that he grabbed an electrical cord from the floor by the bed, threw it over Afrikka's head, and started pulling.
According to Darren, Afrikka wasn't going down without a fight, though. And she started struggling against the cord as he pulled it tighter and moved towards the bathroom.
He said that, after things got rough, he ultimately killed her.
Van told the detectives that after Afrikka was dead, he placed her body in the bathtub and then left the motel.
What you did when I put her in the shower?
Detectives at this point were shocked that Darren was coming clean and telling all the details about the whole situation with Afrikka.
Since they found him so quickly, maybe he was caught off guard and just divulging information because he didn't have enough time to cover it up.
They didn't know what compelled him to confess so easily or to be so cooperative.
As shocked as detectives are by his confession, their investigation into Darren Van is just beginning.
Darren hit them with a bomb.
What are you trying to get out of it? I want to put to death before my next birthday. That would almost be impossible. Well, multiple murders I give you, and I'm willing to give you 7.
More secrets are revealed once we return with more Fatal Attraction.
After confessing to killing 19-year-old Afrikka Hardy in a Hammond, Indiana motel room, 43-year-old Darren Van has stunned detectives by claiming responsibility for a half-dozen more murders.
Y'all got one. I'm trying to get y'all with the rest. You could be crazy.
It's not a common confession, but Darren wouldn't be the first person to falsely claim responsibility for serial murders either.
This is obviously gonna be somewhat difficult because we're gonna need some specific information and to be able to verify these. Well, I gave you this one. You're not wanting to contest the issue. Right, I just want to make sure I get what I want. So I gave you one, the only reason I would know that is if I knew it.
Over the next few hours, Darren opens up about his murderous past.
He was very frank with the Hammond Police Department about his career.
I'm good at killing people. I've always been good at killing people.
According to Darren, he had stashed 6 other bodies across the neighboring city of Gary.
Gary, Indiana is an industrial city that once was booming and really populated. But over the years, the population began to move out, and Gary has been left with more than 10,000 vacant homes.
Are most of these inside of vacant? Yes, most of these are inside vacant.
So this was the perfect recipe for Darren to be able to continue out his crimes, to be able to hide several bodies without anyone detecting him.
And his last victim died just 9 days prior to Afrikka.
You don't know her name or nickname or anything like that? Casper. Her nickname on the streets was Casper. She was a prostitute.
Almost all of the women that Darren Vann targeted were women who worked in the underground sex trafficking industry.
In an effort to secure the death penalty, Darren offers to lead detectives to the bodies of his other victims.
He agreed to take police into Gary, Indiana to recover additional victims that he had recently killed, victims that were unknown to police.
They actually drove around with Darren Vann throughout Gary, and he pointed out the houses where he had hidden the bodies.
It takes several days, but police eventually recover all 6 bodies.
Most of the victims were badly decomposed, so it would require a lot more investigation and DNA testing to positively identify them.
Of the 6 bodies that police found that Darren Vann led them to and confessed to murdering, only one of those women had been reported missing and had a family that was actually out actively searching for her.
35-year-old Annette Jones had disappeared on October 8, 2014.
Her brother, who was a Chicago police officer, filed a missing persons report 2 days later.
He had actually heard rumors that she had been killed and her body left in a vacant building, but was never actively searched for, in part because there were so many vacant buildings in Gary, Indiana.
The Monday after Afrikka's murder, police hold a press conference to announce Darren Vann's arrest.
They indicated to reporters at the time that they believed Vann was responsible for 5 other murders.
But are those the only victims out there? By the end of October 2014, Gary's cold case files included the murders of 18 young women, the oldest dating back to 1993.
Most of the victims were strangled. They were the same pattern.
But were any of them the work of Darren Vann?
After Darren Vann was arrested, families of missing women began to contact the Hammond and the Gary police departments because they wanted to know if their family members could have possibly been his victims.
More secrets are revealed once we return with more Fatal Attraction.
McDonald's is not new to chicken. So maybe stop questioning their chicken cred and get your hands on the McCrispy. Juicy fried chicken, buttery bun, unmatched pickle to chicken ratio. Yeah, they know what they're doing. In fact, we can honestly say they're not new to chicken, they're true to chicken. The McCrispy. Only at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Life is so much more than a diagnosis. It's about sharing time with those you love, hanging with friends who lift you up, and experiencing all those moments that bring you joy. All hits, no skips. Learn more about Kisqali Ribociclib 200 milligrams at KISQALI.com and talk to your doctor to see if Kisqali is right for you. So long live singing to the oldies, jamming out to something new, and everything in between.
After police in Hammond, Indiana arrested 43-year-old Darren Vann for the murder of Afrikka Hardy, he made a surprising confession to 6 more murders.
I have no problem taking you right now to 6 bodies. If y'all got 1, I'll take you 6 more.
To find out that he's taken multiple women's lives, that's something I could not digest.
It is not uncommon for a serial killer, once he's caught, to open up. There are many instances where a serial killer unburdens himself by talking.
However, while Vann had confessed to 7 murders, he's only initially charged with 2, Afrikka and a woman named Annette Jones.
They charged him with 2 murders because they were only able to identify 2 of the bodies.
News of a potential serial killer in their midst rocks the city of Gary.
The shock factor was very fearful for a lot of people in the community that, wow, here's someone that I'm living right next to, and I had no idea that they were doing this.
With Darren in jail awaiting trial, detectives continue working to identify the remaining victims.
The other 5 victims remained nameless as Jane Does while they researched.
It took a lot of time tracking down next of kin of potential victims, collecting DNA samples and sending them off for analysis.
Eventually, police are able to identify all 5 of the other women Darren led them to.
I just think it's important to say their names. Tiara Beatty, Tanya Gadlin, Christine Williams, Sonia Billingsley, and Tracy Martin.
Although the question remains, are they his only victims?
There are, more than a dozen unsolved murders of women in Gary, and it would be a source of solace for the family if a final reckoning could be made for those cases.
But Darren Vann has stopped talking.
He at first cooperated and then later withdrew his cooperation and has never resumed cooperating with police.
I know that emotionally it doesn't affect you as much as far as the families, but for us it's very important.
Well, I told Steve right here, the 7 of them was mistakes, all the rest of them I can't give up.
We're not that far on it. You don't have any other information on who they were or anything that could help me out?
He also never explains why he didn't conceal Afrikka's murder, the same as he had with his previous victims.
Was Afrikka's murder more of a spur-of-the-moment thing compared to others? Or was it possible that he wanted to get caught?
Darren Vann told police that he wanted to face the death penalty. Initially, he indicated that he was willing to die because of the crimes that he had committed.
But as his trial date approaches, he has a change of heart.
May 2018, Darren Vann actually pled guilty to the charges of not only killing Afrikka Hardy, but 6 other women in the Gary, Indiana community. And he did that in exchange for not having to face the death penalty.
He's spending his life behind bars. He has 7 concurrent sentences.
It's not what Afrikka's family hoped for.
At first, they did want him to be sentenced to the death penalty. I mean, how could you not?
We can't see her anymore. All we have is pictures, memories. But he able to eat and sleep and watch TV.
But for all their pain, the family takes comfort in knowing that Afrikka's death may have saved the lives of countless other women.
I'm just glad he can't hurt anybody else.
Afrikka Hardy's murder, as tragic as it is, it led to justice for 6 other women who had been overlooked, who were not even identified as murder victims until we learned about Afrikka Hardy, and she led police to Darren Vann.
Afrikka's friends and family regret that she will never be able to live up to her potential.
She could have been a teacher. She could have been an upcoming next musician. She had a whole life ahead of her. She would have been somebody.
But friends and family also find peace, knowing that by keeping Afrikka's memory alive, they can help others avoid the same fate.
For her legacy, I want other young ladies to know about what happened to her so no other young ladies end up like how my cousin was.
I want to make it known that you don't have to resort to this. You can be whatever you want and you can chase that dream, and you don't have to put yourself in any kind of situation. No one deserves that. Afrikka did not deserve that.
The murder of Afrikka Hardy, one woman's story, helped detectives in solving the case of 6 murders committed by a serial killer. Every day, Black girls die or go missing, and their stories are never shared. Here at the Fatal Attraction Podcast, we will say their names and make sure they are remembered and their stories are told. Coming up on the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast.
It seemed like they had it all.
They had designer things, luxury items.
They were living the American dream.
Until one night, their dream life became a nightmare.
911, where's your emergency?
A woman was kidnapped.
They find the cars engulfed in flames.
There's a body, charred beyond recognition. It was all over the news. The North community was just scared.
In a neighborhood that's pretty well off, people don't get killed here.
But as the investigation unfolds, it turns out everything about this successful suburban couple wasn't what it seemed.
A murder in a wealthy suburban town leaves a community mourning and searching for answers. Who murdered 35-year-old Tanya Worthy? Secrets are revealed. Tune in to the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast. We will see you in the next episode.